Welcome back. This is the Relativity series from LA Theater Works and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, bridging science and the arts in the modern world. Here's part 2 of Spill by Leigh Fondakowski, directed by Martin Jarvis.
Expected survival time in the water is 48 hours.
Yes it is. I knew that because I quizzed Jason for his water survival safety certificate. I quizzed him for that training test. He would practice every night in the pool with Lacey Kathleen. She's our daughter. He knew how to change seawater into fresh water. He knew how to change his coveralls into a flotation device. I told myself if anyone could survive, Jason could. I fell asleep praying with his safety certificate in my hands. I kept convincing myself of his safety. I kept convincing myself.
Bob B. here. Saw on the front page of the newspaper that the Deepwater Horizon had blew out shortly before 10 p.m. Saw those aerial shots of the rig on fire, and I said, oh my God, we've gone and done this again.
Transocean called to let me know that my son Adam was, how was he put? He was not among the injured. He was not among the recovered. They didn't come right out and say that he was missing. My mom was hoping. My mom's still hoping.
Shelley's mom called. She had seen it on TV. She said,
That's Jason's rig!
I told her that's not Jason's rig. They work 150, 200 miles off. That can't be Jason's rig.
But that's from us here in Texas. What if they're counting the miles from where he took off?
So I called Transocean myself. I said, I'm Jason Anderson's father. What's going on? And I was told.
Yes, it's Jason's rig, but we still don't have any word. There are 11 people missing. We still don't have a list. We're still searching.
They lied to us on that deal. They kept searching for 2-3 days, but they knew those guys were gone. They knew absolutely they were gone.
The only thing that haunts me is, why didn't I know that this happened before they called me, you know? You should know when a piece of you is missing. You should know when a piece of you is gone. I even wrote it on the cover of my journal, April 20th, 2010, the start of hell.
They said it was an explosion, but it was more like a flash. That methane gas was all over the floor, all in the air, all around. That is a thought that will drive you crazy if you let it.
For 5 years, I bragged that I got my son Gordon that job, and I did. And then, of course, I had to take responsibility for having Gordon on that rig. Now, I know that's not an entirely intellectually valid idea, but emotionally it is, and I guess I never will. I had an appointment with my dentist, and they called me the day of my appointment to cancel it because they had found his son, dead of an overdose. And so when they rescheduled it, I went, and I wanted to talk to him to express my condolences, but also because I've been sober a long time, and there isn't a parent whose child dies of an overdose who doesn't blame themselves somehow, and I just wanted to tell him about my years of experience. And one of the things I told him is I said, I can't imagine how you feel. And the date of that dentist appointment was April 20th, 2010. And that night at 10 o'clock, Gordon was killed. And so the next day I knew exactly how he felt. But I'd been right. I couldn't imagine how he felt.
I called every single hospital in the state of Louisiana. I believed I would find him. I believed Jason would be found. I believed he'd be fine. Then my daughter, Lacey Kathleen, came into my room and she said, "Is my daddy dead?" I said, "Sweetheart, no, we have to have hope." And she said, "Well, my daddy came and told me he was dead. Maybe he wanted us to know." She was 5 years old. How in the world do you answer that? I'd like to know who is going to answer that little girl. Why her daddy had to die, because I don't have an answer for her.
This is Billy Nungesser, Plaquemines Parish President.
First night I got the call, I drove to Venice, to the furthest tip of Louisiana, and at the Coast Guard station I listened to the radio. They were pulling the men out of the water. I had called 911, had all our ambulances come down to the dock, figuring they'd be bringing injured people in. For hours I listened. We got Joe Smith out the water, we got Bobby Brown, but by the next morning they were still on that rescue boat. Couldn't understand why they weren't bringing people in. For 30 hours? That is a crime in itself. You know why they did that? They held those men on that rescue boat until they signed non-disclosure agreements. Now, when they decided it was time to take them in, they took them 4 hours away to Port Fourchon. When I asked the Coast Guard command why, he says, well, that's where their cars are. Nobody went and got their keys when they jumped off that rig. They put them on a bus, had an orientation, gave them all a drug test, then they took them all the way to Kenner, where they finally got to see their family. No one even knew who had survived. Looking back, that's the first mistake the Coast Guard allowed, contributed to, or worked with BP in what I call was a cover-up to keep the public from knowing, to keep the people. It seemed like from day one, lawyers was running the show. So that night was a sign of things to come.
April 22nd, Earth Day. The Deepwater Horizon drilling rig, located 50 miles offshore the coast of Louisiana, listed and sank to the bottom of the sea.
The search and rescue for the missing men on the Deepwater Horizon was suspended today at 5 p.m. The 11 men have perished.
Now, BP, in their permit to drill, said that the likelihood of a blowout was insignificant. And then they said,
well, you don't have to worry about the consequences of a blowout. We can handle 162,000 barrels of oil a day coming from 1 mile below on the seafloor.
And I'm thinking, well, if you can, it would be the first damn time in history, because we never have. In all the history of the industry, we have never been able to handle a pollution event of this magnitude. We straw, dispersants, containment, boom, basically paper towels to clean it up. If that oil gets out of control, we'll be extremely lucky if we can catch 3-4%. It's what I call the trick of trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
Mr. Hayward, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Tony Hayward, CEO of BP at the time of the blowout. From his sworn deposition in the criminal case against BP.
Mr. Hayward, you hold a PhD, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a geologist. I worked for BP as a rig geologist for 8 or 9 years. I started out my career in the North Sea.
And you became CEO of the company in 2007.
That's correct, ma'am.
Now, Dr. Hayward, when did you first learn of the rig explosion on board the Deepwater Horizon?
In the early morning hours of April the 21st, I was awakened by a call.
What were you told?
I was told that there'd been an incident, a serious incident in the Gulf of Mexico. It was the Deepwater Horizon. They were in the process of abandoning ship.
And when did you decide to go to Houston?
I decided to go to Houston 2 days later, as the rig was sinking, in fact.
What happened when you arrived in Houston?
I'd been briefed on the plane coming over, but when I arrived in Houston and looked at the video for the first time, it was... You had 5,000 feet of riser pipe trawled around the seafloor like a piece of spaghetti. I thought, how could this happen? We hadn't had a blowout for 25 years. The industry has been exploring deep water for 20 years. How on earth did this happen?
At that time, Dr. Hayward, how much oil did BP estimate was flowing from the blown-out well into the Gulf of Mexico?
We had no accurate way to estimate the flow of oil.
And what was BP's plan to stop the flow of oil in the subsea?
There was no protocol for this. The only sure way we knew to stop it was to drill a relief well. But we knew that it would take months for us to do that.
How many months?
At least 3 months, maybe longer.
And there was no other plan to stop the flow of oil into the Gulf of Mexico?
There was no other plan. BP was not prepared for this. But everything we did was in line with the rest of the industry. No one was prepared for this.
BP had set up a special room at their headquarters in Houston with blacked out windows and screen after screen showing the gushing oil, recorded by a series of underwater cameras. A highly immersive visualization environment. They called it the Hive.
Water depth of 5,000 feet, you can't touch anything, can't physically go down there. There's enough pressure down there to crush a manned submarine like a can of Coca-Cola. Anything that you have to do in deep water, you do remote. This was going to be the biggest engineering challenge we have ever faced.
They called in the best minds in the industry. The wild well experts from across the country and around the world. A highly specialized team of people, and they kept those seafloor videos under wraps for as long as they could, because that's what they didn't want the public to see.
In a press conference earlier today, a spokesperson for BP said BP now estimates the flow rate from the blown-out well to be about 1,000 barrels of oil per day, leaking into the Gulf of Mexico.
To 2 attempts to shut the blowout preventer using remotely operated vehicles have failed.
Carrie St. Pay, oil regulator for the state of Louisiana.
I remember the explosion, the fire. I sent an email to BP expressing our sorrow at the loss of life out there, but we had no idea how much oil was coming up. Initial estimates were really low. Initial reports, you take those with a grain of salt, especially here in Louisiana. We didn't know exactly how much, but they're losing a lot of oil.
Gary Bartholemy, fisherman.
We was working out on the waters in the bayou when the word came out that they had an oil spill. They told us to go front, stop fishing right now, come in off the water. We figured we'd go in maybe 2-3 days, a week. We'd be back to work the next week. We had oil spills before. We had no idea how far this was going to go.
Billy Nungesser again.
I flew with the Coast Guard, Captain Stanton, offshore by helicopter. Already there was oil on the surface of the water. It was slick oily, red, looked like blood. Captain said,
"Don't worry, Billy. It's 48 miles offshore. BP doesn't think it's gonna hit the shore."
"Well, who's in charge here? Coast Guard or BP?"
Well, Coast Guard's in charge, but we're only 51% in charge.
How's that gonna work out, Mr. 51%?
We are not the experts here. You got a better plan?
Land this helicopter. We have to come up with a better plan. We have to stop this oil from coming ashore.
So we sitting around, and next week came, still can't go out. Next week, still can't go out. We live off the land, off the water, You can go out there and get any fish you want, any crab, oysters, wild games, too, and everything's right here, We call it God country. I'm 65 years old, been fishing oysters all my life. I started thinking to myself, what are we going to do, How long for this to come back?
Jonathan Henderson, environmental lawyer.
Our phones were just blowing up. The media was calling us from everywhere. How bad is it? How much oil is spilling? What's going on? But the media knew more than we did at this point. Then I got a call from one of our supporters. He was a guy with a small plane.
Jonathan, would it help if we flew out there, see what's going on?
I didn't think twice about it. I said yes. So we drove to Gulfport, Mississippi, and we flew out to the source, 50 miles offshore. The scene out there was like World War II or Pearl Harbor. It was a battle scene. BP had moved rigs and equipment in place to drill a relief well. They were burning off the gases, massive amount of methane and benzene. The entire area around the scene was just filled with a gray haze. Dispersants were raining down, and off in the distance, they were burning the oil off the surface of the water. The ocean was on fire. There was smoke everywhere. It smelled and it tasted like fuel. The Gulf of Mexico had become a war zone.
For weeks, the oil was just floating around out there. We have very weak tidal currents here in Louisiana. Oil moves according to the wind more than anything else. And we knew that oil was coming northward. We knew it was likely that oil would be blown in and stacked up in our estuaries, wouldn't doubt several feet thick. We have to deal with this oil now, because it's coming. 7 knots on the wind, and it's coming.
Then BP was nice enough to finally release to us the seafloor videos. Well, we looked at that and we said, this is not 1,000 or 5,000 barrels a day leaking into the ocean. This is not even 10,000 barrels. This has got to be 50,000 or more barrels of oil a day gushing into the Gulf of Mexico. Anyone living down there on the Gulf Coast in the path of that oil, their lives are going to change forever. I said, this is going to be big. This is going to be a game changer for the entire industry.
There were rumors that the oil had made landfall, but the Coast Guard was still denying it. I said, I'm gonna go out and find proof and show it to him. I was working with a boat captain. We left out of Venice. We were in the East Bay at the mouth of the Mississippi River when my captain said,
Jonathan, let's turn around. There's no oil here.
No, wait. I have a feeling.
This is my favorite fishing ground. I pray to God there's no oil here. Not here. Let's go.
That's when I saw it. Captain, right over there it is. That's BP oil.
No, not here, Jonathan. Not here, not here.
He kept saying that, and I reached down and just scooped a whole bunch of it up in my hand. Now, I don't recommend doing that because I couldn't feel my hand for the rest of 2010. The oil had come in.
Thick, sticky oil crept into the delicate marshes of the Mississippi Delta, an arrival dreaded for a month since the crude started spewing into the Gulf, as anger and frustration mounted over efforts to plug the gusher from a blown-out well and contain the spill.
This oil is going to affect the most sensitive life stages of everything. Because of the time of year this has occurred, in the spring, everything's spawning, everything's nesting, everything's sprouting in our estuaries. That's thousands of species of birds, plants, and fish. Now, we survive things here in Louisiana. We are a resilient people. But with the marsh we're losing, the storm surges hit harder and harder. Now, these marshes are the only thing left between us, our way of life, our homes, our families, everything. When those marshes are gone, so are we.
Now, by the morning, the oil was all along the shore, 50, 100 foot wide, thick black oil. I was out with some CNN crew. We saw 9 birds, same ones you saw, covered with oil, couldn't breathe. Seen one of them birds try to blink its eyes, and it couldn't, so you can imagine. It'll get to you. We pulled up close, we walked in knee-deep water with blankets and picked up the birds, put them in a boat. That was on CNN that night. Even Anderson Cooper said, "Don't worry, Billy, surely they're gonna get you some help now." We took those birds to get cleaned up. It's a delicate process, you know, stripping the oil off the feathers, the wings, the eyes, the beak, body. They gave all those birds a number. I don't even know if those birds made it. Those birds didn't ask for this. You know what happened? The next day, the Coast Guard passed a new law, 80-foot rule. If you go within 80 foot of the boom, you go to jail. Criminal offense, and it's on your record for the rest of your life. I'm an American. I believe in God and country. It's very hard for me to sit up here and beat up on the Coast Guard, but they were told to protect BP. Not the wildlife, not the wetlands, and not our way of life down here. But the American people deserve to know the truth.
Bob B. went down to Grand Isle, and the people who lived there all had crosses up.
One cross for everything that died, including their way of life. So, I go, stop the car, start up the sand dunes, and people's homes are right next door, are guards. And they look at me and they say, "You can't go on the beach." Why can't I go on the beach? BP won't allow that. Well, I started to wonder who was controlling this country, the people who own the property, the state, or BP. Well, I quickly found out. I did finally get taken out to the beach. They took away my camera. They took away anything I could have to take notes, certainly nothing to record anything, and they said, "You can look." Well, of course, the things that I began to see, dead sea life and oiled wetland, oiled birds, quickly turn your stomach.
When the oil companies first came here, all the land was a beautiful jungle, pristine. We thought, hey, sure, you need a canal for your pipeline. Go ahead, oil companies, cut a canal here, cut a canal there, put a pipeline here, put a pipeline there. We thought this natural world was so vast it could never be destroyed. Out there now are 14,000 production platforms and mile over mile of pipeline, like a spaghetti of pipelines here in Louisiana. We've lost 1,900 square miles of land between us and the Gulf of Mexico. If it ever changes, it will be as a result of this spill.
As the oil continues to flow in the Gulf of Mexico, BP is marshaling equipment for an attempt as early as Sunday at a top kill, which involves pumping heavy mud into the top of the blown-out well to try to plug the gusher.
In addition, the plans include a junk shot, shooting golf balls, shredded tires, knotted rope, and other material into the well to clog it up and contain the leak.
Michael Brune, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, Environmental Preservation, spoke today.
We're now looking at a scenario where response plans include lighting the ocean on fire, pouring chemicals into the water, and using trash and human hair to stop the flow of oil. Now, if this is their response, we need to rethink taking the risk in the first place.
BP was throwing everything they had at this thing, but all the money in the world couldn't buy a quick fix for this. And by this point, the whole world was watching.
As the drama of the oil crisis continues to unfold in the Gulf Coast region, President Obama spoke to the nation.
For decades, we have known the days of cheap and easily accessible oil were numbered. For decades, we talked and talked about the need to end America's century-long addiction to fossil fuels. And for decades, we have failed to act. The consequences of our inaction are now in plain sight. An entire way of life is threatened by a menacing cloud of black crude. We cannot consign our children to this future. The time to embrace a clean energy future is now.
Against strong opposition from the Louisiana legislature, President Obama has issued a temporary moratorium on all deep water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, halting work on 33 offshore rigs. The president met with the families of the 11 men on Thursday, with many beginning to call this disaster Obama's Katrina.
One thing I'll say, I never thought I ever wanted to go to the White House. It is impressive. It really is. It was never anything I wanted to do, but then once I got in there, I was like, wow, this is really something. You know, just being there. It's real fancy. It really is.
When we met with President Obama, he explained to us his decision about his moratorium on offshore drilling. And I told him, Mr. President, don't do it. Please don't do it. We need to keep drilling. We need to keep drilling for the country. We don't want to keep buying all our oil from the Middle East. We don't want to make them rich. I don't. I want it to come from right here in America, create more jobs. And I know my son Jason would want that too.
I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Henderson.
My son died so that the American people can have their way of life. I stand by this industry. And Mr. President, we need you to stand with us too. Will you do that?
I know this creates difficulty for the people who work on these rigs, but we need to know the facts before we allow deep water drilling to continue. We don't want to lose any more of our sons.
We told him that moratorium was wrong. Every one of us did.
Well, not all of us told him that. I agreed with the president. Not a very popular position here in the South, but I am a rarity here in Louisiana. I'm a registered Democrat. Out of the 11 families who were there with him that day, I'm pretty sure that I was the only one in the room who voted for him.
Obama came up and he shook my hand and he said,
Let us know if there's anything that we can do.
Well, I looked down for a second to think of something to say. And when I looked up, he was already on to the next one. Goodbye. Mom says, well, he is the leader of the free world, Arleen. You should have talked faster.
That moratorium was declared because 11 men just got killed and a rig blew up. And the president looked me in the eye and he told me that himself.
I'm not into politics all that much, but we are a country divided. That is a fact. And you do hear a lot of bad things about Nancy Pelosi down here. Ah, Pelosi this, Pelosi that. Throw darts at her picture down here in West Texas, you know. But if that woman wasn't sincere, she could have fooled me. After Obama left, she sat down with us in a room a long time, and she just let us say whatever we needed to say. And that was probably more meaningful than anything. But when Obama stopped the drilling in the Gulf, I just thought, here we go again, 2 countries. You walk in your house, you flip on your lights, turn on your heat, you expect it to be there. You don't think about what it took to get it there. So that moratorium, that just doesn't make any sense to me. None of us can survive without oil. That's our future out there. That's the only middle class we got left in this country.
After our meeting at the White House, they held a press conference, and all those reporters wanted to talk about was the oil spill.
Mr. Anderson, would you like to comment on the oil spill?
And I said, look, get your eye on the ball. Before you ever get to the oil spill, you need to remember that 11 people got killed. I don't want to hear another word about Dawn dishwashing liquid cleaning those ducks up and you put them back in the water. The environment will survive. We can't get our guys back. They're gone. It was an explosion, not a spill.
That was not an easy day. I read an article shortly after the meeting with the president, congressman from Louisiana fighting over the moratorium. First time I'd ever seen an article written about the Deepwater Horizon when they did not mention that 11 men were killed. They talked about the moratorium, they talked about the cleanup, no mention of the 11 men who died. And I thought, oh, this is how it's going to be.
All I could think about is blood on my hands. I can say that because I spent my life in this industry. I'm an offshore daughter, an offshore sister, an offshore worker, and an offshore wife. Blood is on our hands. All of us. And I get so angry when I hear people complain about the price of a gallon of gas. I think gas should cost $10 a gallon. And the faces of those men should be plastered on the pump. I don't want the oil companies to get any richer. I just want people to make the connection. There are people's lives at the other end of that pump.
I really didn't pay too much attention to that oil spill. Didn't even know much about it until sitting here talking to you. How could I? When you're an oil field wife, you can handle anything. You have to. You have a baby in your arms and another on the way, and your car breaks down on the side of the road. You have to deal with it because your husband's offshore. You're an offshore wife. That's who you are. But no one can prepare you for this. Jason had 2 tally books right before he died. I only found out after. You ever seen a tally book? You should try to get your hands on one. In one of them, he kept a list of all the maintenance that needed to be done on the rig. And in the other, he wrote a list of all the things he was asked to do on that rig that weren't right. Those tally books went down with the rig. I told you before, Jason never spoke to me about any trouble on that rig, but he did tell his father. I know that much. He told his father everything. They used to have breakfast together, right here, sitting right here at this table.
My son Jason and I were close, real close. We always spent one day out of the 2 weeks he was home together. First thing he wanted to do was see his wife and kids, but before he went back offshore, we'd spend a day, have breakfast together, and we'd go out. I have a pasture out past Edna, and after breakfast, we go out and check the deer feeders. Just ride around, talk, BS. Last time Jason was home, he told me, he said,
Dad, what these guys are trying to make us do, change up our procedures, the way we normally do it, our cement plugs, our squeezers and everything, the way they're trying to get us to do that, to save some time and some money, they're going to kill every one of us. They're going to kill us all.
Told me that right over there while we were riding around the pasture. I told him, if you're that concerned, you should speak up. You go to your supervisors and tell them, this is not safe. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. They got to stop and hear you out. That's policy on every rig.
It's not that easy, Dad. You know how it is. Fall in line. Get it done.
Jason, you can always get another job. You can't get another life. You have to say something.
I will, Dad. I will. It's almost over. If anything goes wrong, we'll just shut it in. This well from hell will be in the rearview mirror soon enough.
Jason said, I will, but he'd never leave his guys behind to save himself. The well control part of the job, Jason took to heart. He knew that him and the guys in that drill shack were the buffer. They're the buffer between life and death for everyone on that rig. I talk to that boy. Talk to him every day. That might sound crazy to you, but it keeps me from going crazy. Jason was right there in that drill shack shutting it in when it blew out. He was doing his job. And as heck would have it, there it is.
The billions of gallons of oil that have gushed into the Gulf of Mexico and BP's efforts to fight the massive leak with chemical dispersants are turning the Gulf into a lifeless, toxic stew of oil and chemicals.
As a fisherman, you have your ups and downs, your good days and your bad days, but you're happy because you always know you can make a living out there on the water. You're going to make you some money for sure. But now, we don't know what to think now because there's no future out there. No small oysters, no spats, so we don't know how long for this come back. These fishermen's dealing with it the best way they can. Some of them drinking. I'm telling it like it is. I keep busy, me, but they're walking the road, saying, I wish the season was open. I do too, but what we're going to do is hang in there. Something will happen. Something will happen sooner or later, you know. I rise every day.
BP has begun recruiting men and women from the Gulf Coast region in an effort to create a citizens' army of cleanup workers to combat the spill. They're calling it the Vessels of Opportunity.
Jorey Danos, cleanup worker.
Yeah, this is my story. Now, BP say, come on, we have an opportunity. Vessels of opportunity, that's what they called it. We're hiring, come be a hero. Come clean up the oil. Come clean up BP's mess. Whatever, that's the truth. And I said, I'll go.
You want to be a part of history?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
That's going to be in the history books in 20 years, he says. Just like that Exxon Valdez. But I told him, Jorey, don't go. Don't go, don't go. Something told me didn't want him to go.
I'm angry because my pride took the best of me. Because that woman right there, my wife Jolene, she told me not to go.
We were living on $300 a week, and he said, but Joe, it's $300 a day. I said, Jorey, we ain't gonna have no extras, but our bills are gonna be paid. But that's what he kept saying, Jolene, this is history. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of it. I mean, I can't force you to stay.
I thought I was doing something. You know, BP say, come get y'all groceries, ribeyes, anything you wanted. You know what I'm saying? And in 10 days, you was making $3,000 cash. The boats were even more, you know. I mean, where you gonna make $3,000 in 10 days when you sitting on a boat? I was in the Venice location, where Mississippi Canyon is located. And I grew up on the bayou myself. I knew how to handle our trawl boat. And we got out there and they started giving us containment booms. But in all reality, it just couldn't contain half of it, couldn't absorb it, or even do anything for it, because it was so thick. Oh, I alone myself should have took a picture. Oh, I put a deck brush straight into the oil, and it's standing straight up bobbing on that. But we go to this location for a month at a time, scooping up oil so hot, so smelly, so different, but $300 a day. $300 a day. You know, you want to take a shower after this is said and done. I'm going to bed. I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. Ribeye in my stomach. Wonderful. Yes, indeed. But then the dispersant come into effect. Dispersant. B-52 bombers. They're going to the left and spraying the dispersant, and we're going to the right, pick up the gunk, the big, thick stuff that's still left over. I forgot which scripture it is in the Bible that Jesus turned that water into wine. But that wine sparkled like crystal clear glass. And when that dispersant hit the water, oh, it looked like a million broken mirrors. It sparkled. It was beautiful. But you would pass through it. What the fuck? What's that smell? What is going on? What is this shit? What are we going through? Now, when I seen that, I started thinking to myself, started thinking about coming home.
He'd been gone for a month out there on the water, on the jack-up boat. For the last 2 weeks, something changed. I could hear it in his voice. For the last 2 weeks, all I heard was, I'm ready to come home. I'm ready. I said, come home. He'd say, I'm gonna stick it out a little longer. I said, Jorey, come home. Every day, every day, every day.
I wish I had a vision camera. I could give it to you. Now, you wouldn't have to go through the bullshit of finding different stories of this one and this one, but I'm gonna tell you. So I can't give you no more than what it is. Now, you stress the issue of the effects, huh? We had no respirators. Respirators, okay? No training. They gave us Tyvek suits and gloves. That's it. No instructions or anything. No, nothing. They gave us a paper to sign, huh? That if we saw any sea turtles, we would call this number. That's it. And then it was pretty much coon-ass ingenuity. And you know how we did it on our boat. We would get one section of containment boom, pull it out of the water, have a drum right there coming out of the water. That shit's weighing about 30 pounds one length, 6 foot long of this fucking roux-ass oil, nasty, smelly, whatever. And your mindset, 300 a day. Mindset, your family, mindset. I'm doing whatever I gotta do. I'm doing something good. But in 800-degree heat, you're about to go into cardiac arrest, or you going crazy because your body heat everything. The gloves rip apart, and boom, you grab that. You say, fuck it, grab the motherfucker, throw it in the drum, pop, 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 oil all over. I had to tape the glove up tight enough to keep it on my wrist. But I was feeling panicky trying to get it off, and I said to my friend, Lance, cut it off, cut it, Lance, cut it. Panicking, I just get it off me. Finally get it off, pull it off. Get this one off. And now we're embalmed with fucking oil. Cause the whole boom come up. The whole containment boom. And when that came back, I got showered in oil. I can't explain myself real good. I can't explain how you want me to explain. I'm not that educated enough to give you these words that can beat straight to the bush. You a coordinate. You understand where I'm coming from. It's my story is what it is. You can give a better interpretation than I can because you've seen me. I'm talking to you, right? So a play. Well, I want them to cuss in there because you've never seen in your life before crystal clear water, and you smell chemicals, okay? And now, look at me now, sitting home with kids, no income, no possibility of income, losing weight, that you got to control yourself, stomach pain so sharp. I'm angry. I'm mad because my greed took the best of me. Greed, money, devastation, you put that in, huh? They say, file a BP claim. File a BP claim. Fuck a BP claim. How can I prove the toxins? How can I prove that BP put the toxins in me? Because I went out there and I seen what I seen. People dream to see what I see.
In yet another attempt to stop the flow of oil, BP has designed a capping stack, which they will attempt to install as early as Friday.
The BP spill camera has been a constant presence in the corner of TV screens, mocking reassurances from officials who described the latest attempt to stop the gusher.
They had so many failed attempts. Frankly, I was worried. Was the integrity of this well going to hold? What if all the pressure they are putting on this well to try and shut it in causes the casing to rupture? What if the rock formation breaks apart and the casing just falls away? What if the seafloor itself liquefies and all 200 million barrels of oil in that Macondo reservoir spills out into the Gulf of Mexico with no way to stop it? We are about this far away from that happening. And if that happens, we'll really be in the shits then.
Now, Dr. Hayward, I understand that the use of the capping stack was controversial.
There were some of us who felt that closing the capping stack could cause the well casing to fail.
In other words, Dr. Hayward, there was concern that there could be a breach subsurface.
That is correct.
A capping stack had never been used in Deepwater. This one had to be designed and built from scratch. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you consider that risk?
We had to employ every conceivable engineering option at our disposal. Our priority was that we had to stop the flow of oil.
But a subsea breach or rupture would make the problem significantly worse, would it not, Dr. Hayward?
We believed the well had integrity. We believed it would hold. I believed it would hold. Our technicians did.
Okay. Can you confirm the valves on the capping stack are operational?
Confirmed.
Okay. Let's finally shut this well from hell in.
Everyone in that room held their breath as the technicians closed the valves one at a time.
And shutting valve 1?
You could have heard a pin drop.
The flow rate is decreasing.
What's the wellhead pressure?
Wellhead pressure is fluctuating.
Fluctuating like how?
BP believed that they could monitor the pressure and take action if there was any indication of well failure.
They took a big risk on that.
Okay. Go ahead and close valve 2.
Wellhead pressure is still fluctuating, but within range.
And the flow rate?
The flow rate is still decreasing.
But they were not out of the woods yet. Not even close.
Okay. Close valve 3.
Okay. Shutting valve 3. The flow rate is decreasing. Decreasing. It stopped. Wellhead pressure has stabilized within range.
For 24 hours, they watched those pressure readings. It was like purgatory. No one slept.
And they got lucky. It held.
It took 87 days to stop that gusher. July 15th, 2010, the media finally declared...
The Macondo well at Mississippi Canyon 252 is effectively dead.
Only after spewing about 5 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico.
We've counted up over 20 instances now where, had BP taken the safer, more expensive route out on that rig, instead of the cheaper, easier, quicker route, this never would have happened. I was coming back from my last trip down there. It was still pretty horrible, and I had to teach a class the next day. So I'm thinking, well, I've got to tell the students something important that I've learned. So I thought, I've got Bob B's equation for disaster. So next morning, I go up to the blackboard and I write A plus B equals C. And these are graduate engineering students, so they're all taking notes. And I say, A is natural hazards, things like hurricanes and earthquakes and deep water and volcanoes. This is Mother Nature, earthworking. This is normal. I say, that's A. Now, B is kind of Mother Nature working also, but not quite normal. It includes human hubris, arrogance, greed, indolence, and ignorance. You combine A plus B, and C is a catastrophic disaster sooner or later. And I turn to the class and I say, now this is pretty startling because the engineering equation to create these systems does not include B. The days of poking a hole in the ground and the oil comes out are over. We have now gotten into extraction systems so complex, the consequences of failure are so dramatically greater, and now we want to go to the Arctic? Are you kidding me? A blowout in winter under the ice? I've had to confront my colleagues at Shell. They show me all the gizmos. I say, I know we have the gizmos to do it, but should we?
1 year later, Arleen Weise.
On the 1-year anniversary, Transocean took us out on a helicopter to the side. On the ride, people are talking, and when the pilot says, this is it, here's where the rig went down, and everybody's looking out the window, looking at it, it got real quiet. I know it's silly, but I thought, Adam, rise up. Rise up. You know, everybody says, you don't have any closure. You didn't see him in the casket. Let me tell you what. I don't think I'd ever be the same if I saw my son in a casket. That would just... Mom's still hoping. My mom still says, I keep thinking that boy's gonna walk through that door. I said, Mom, it's never gonna happen. It's just never gonna happen. My son Adam is on the bottom of the Gulf with the Deepwater Horizon.
Last night I couldn't go to sleep for thinking about Gordon's last moments on that rig. People say, don't think about it. Well, it's not that easy. I wish it was. One thing I've learned, the Bible doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil, and the love of money gave rise to a lot of bad, greedy decisions. See, my anger comes not from that Gordon was killed, not even that he was killed because they were negligent, even though they were. Not even that. What makes me mad is that they did it for money. BP has reached a point where they've gotten all their stockholders' money back. We don't have Gordon back, and no amount of money in the world will bring him back. If you're going to gamble your money, gamble your money. Take a risk with your business, that's fine, but don't gamble with people's lives! We're children's dads. Don't gamble when you can't afford to cover your bet.
I drove across the Louisiana border to Blessing to talk with Shelley Anderson one last time.
You know, when the Coast Guard called off the search for the missing men, they never actually said your husband is dead. They send a letter says presumed death, but it's not a death certificate. Makes a lot of things in life harder, just on a practical level, not to have that. I didn't have the key to his safe. I had to hire someone to come over and drill into that. But when I did, I found out that he was planning a second honeymoon for us. Our 10-year anniversary. He had arranged for us to have the same room at the same resort. I miss him so much. I keep thinking about that night at the casino before that last hitch. Jason and all the guys around him. Could I have done something differently? Should I have seen this coming? There were never any long goodbyes. The comings and goings were part of life, just the way things were. Except that last time. That truck ride to the airport.
Shelley, if anything were to happen to me out there on that rig, would you and the kids stay in the house?
I kissed him goodbye. And then I said, do you want another kiss? He said,
That one was real nice.
"Why didn't I say don't go? Don't go to work today. I got a bad feeling." When we said goodbye in that truck, we both knew that it'd be the last time we'd see each other. We didn't say it out loud, but we both knew.
The moratorium on offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico was lifted October 12th, 2010, after less than 5 months.
The president appointed a commission to investigate this disaster.
The commission presented a 400-page report to Congress in January 2011.
Very few members of Congress ever read it.
BP was found guilty of criminal negligence and gross misconduct. They paid historic fines and settlements upwards of $40 billion.
Only 25% of the oil spilled into the Gulf was ever recovered.
The rest of the oil remains slowly degrading at the bottom of the sea.
And BP?
Our federal lease rights in the Gulf of Mexico were revoked for a time.
But you got them back.
Oh, yes. BP resumed drilling in the Gulf of Mexico in July 2011.
Less
than 15 months after the spill.
Life is funny that way, isn't it?
This is Spill by Leigh Fondakowski, directed by Martin Jarvis. Starring Elisa Bocanegra, Gilbert Glenn Brown, Nicholas Hormann, Travis Johns, Jane Kaczmarek, James Morrison, Darren Richardson, Kate Steele, and Mark Jude Sullivan. Production manager Rick V. Moreno. Associate Artistic Director Annalise Erickson. Editor Julian Nicholson. Recording engineer, sound designer, and mixer Mark Holden for the Invisible Studios, West Hollywood. And next time on the Relativity series, a man wakes up in the hospital after a car crash and sees the world as the person he was 3 years ago.
Have you even called her?
Of course we have.
And?
We've spoken.
So when is she getting here? No, that's not right. She would be here. She'd run here. Did you tell her? Christ, there's no way. She is true. She is the truest thing. Don't you dare say, I want to call her, get me a phone.
I'm sorry, I don't think it would help you.
For Christ's sakes, you're trying to give me a heart attack as well as a hole in my head.
Before you phone her...
Just get me a fucking phone.
Before you phone her, would you mind if we just revisited some of the things we were talking about yesterday?
Why?
I think it might be helpful.
Donnie's Brain by Rona Monroe. Next time on the Relativity series. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Ron Lipkin, Senior Radio Producer for LA Theater Works. The Relativity series is brought to you by LA Theater Works, Susan Lowenberg, Producing Director, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, bridging science and the arts in the modern world.